So let me just say this. I had a completely different talk written for this morning. It was kind of a more light-filled lesson about surfing the waves of anger and sadness. That's kind of what I was supposed to be talking about this morning. And I've actually felt pretty confident about the content of the lesson and its merit until the gravity of what happened in Texas kind of stopped me in my tracks. And I realized I needed to talk very differently about the subjects of anger and sadness this morning. And I don't do that very often. I write my talks. I just trust the guidance, and Spirit nudged me to go deeper with this lesson as I watched the news on Wednesday morning. And it was actually an emotional 24 hours because Tuesday night, the night before, we had watched the last two episodes of This Is Us. And I don't know if you watched that show, but it just opened your heart wide open. The characters explore lots of emotional and different twists and turns of life that are common themes for a lot of us, right? And so I just messy and real and all that. And so I was just wide open. And there are many things in life that kind of set us spinning our emotional spice rack, right? One minute we can be touched with deep satisfaction and peace about things, and the next we hear of something tragic happening in the world, and we search for the right word to describe how we feel, whatever that emotional wave is that's washing over us. One day things seem to be somewhat orderly and predictable, and the next day there's just this big twist and nothing seems normal. It's just part of being human. But how do we do this? How do we do it? How do we learn of these 19 children and their teachers being killed at a school far away from us and figure out what the wave of emotion that we're feeling really is? And I definitely felt these two emotions we're supposed to be talking about this morning. I definitely felt some anger and I felt sadness, but there were some other things mixed up in there too. Maybe you can relate. I felt shock. I felt disgust. I felt this deep compassion and frustration and helplessness and fatigue, overwhelm, anguish, sympathy, heartbreak. I mean, you can name them all. And I hope that I'm not alone, that we were all just trying to figure out what words do we label this with. And I was struggling about figuring out, what do I say to you this morning? What could I possibly offer to us spiritually that could help this morning? And I thought also about all of the losses that we've experienced as a collective over the last couple of years of this pandemic. Most of us have lost loved ones in the past 2 years, COVID or not, right? Some of us have lost pets and jobs and routines and homes and relationships and health, things we care deeply about. Anger and sadness have visited all of us. And like human beings have done at times of overwhelm for time immemorial, we gather in places of worship, in communities of faith, in our spiritual families with the God of our understanding to find solace or guidance or comfort or understanding. And here we are this morning. Perhaps you didn't walk in the door this morning with Uvalde, Texas on your heart. But most of us walked in with something. We walked in with something this morning that we're carrying. And I know a lot of you personally, and I know some of the things that you carry that bring up that anger and sadness, those challenges in your life. So how do I help? This whole month has been about exploring emotions, and all of us have the feels about something. And anger and sadness are certainly waves that we're trying to learn how to surf as spiritually as we can. So what can I offer? Here's what I know. Anger and sadness often show up together. They're kind of all knotted up, it's intertwined. And often our behaviors are about one of them, but they're actually about the other. I find that I'm angry at the same things that make me sad, and I'm sad about the same things that make me angry. Do you get that? Right? And depending on our personality or our tendencies, we may express more dominantly as angry while others around you express more dominantly as sad. Tears are tears, words are words, intense emotions are emotions, but some of us are more sad than mad or mad than sad. So, my first spiritual lesson this morning is to realize that we feel emotions differently. Differently. Let's stop splitting hairs and judging each other for how the intense emotions show up. Pretty much when they're intense, they're going to be either sad or mad. And I think anger and sadness show up when we care about things. When something matters to us, when things change that we don't want to change, when something goes away that we wanted to keep, when we want something to happen that's not happening, or when we don't want something to happen and it is happening. Does that ring true for you? Just for a moment, just think about something that evokes anger or sadness or has evoked that in the past. Bring that to your mind. It could be a small thing or a huge thing. Just lightly hold it in your mind. And let's see if what I said fits your situation. Is it something you care about? Is it something that matters to you and your life? Did something change that you didn't want to change? Did something go away that you wanted to keep? Is something not happening that you really wanted to happen? Or is something happening that you don't want to happen? Raise your hand if any of those statements fit your... Okay, good. I didn't leave anybody out. So when an emotional wave of anger or sadness washes over you, let it remind you that guess what? You're human. You're a human being. And we human beings were given our emotions from the intelligence of the universe because we needed them. They are a part of our navigation system meant to inform us of the important things and the importance of holding all of that very lightly and the importance of releasing whatever needs to be released. We talked about this in the Sacred Cup this morning. The Buddhists teach that the root of all suffering is attachment. Attachment. Suffering is optional. And the end of suffering comes from accepting the impermanence of everything. And that impermanence is holy and perfect. Accepting impermanence is something every single one of us has to practice. You know how I know? Because you're all breathing, you're all human, and this is a lifelong lesson, right? Impermanence is a hard one. This too shall pass. This too is important. And impermanence often makes us angry and sad. Life gives us opportunity after opportunity to practice the acceptance of impermanence, doesn't it? So what do we do when this wave of anger and sadness comes? What is the practice, Laine? What do we do? The best spiritual truth I can share with you is partly my own, but partly from other spiritual teachers too. Let's start with the big one, Brene Brown. Brene says this: anger is an emotion that we feel when something gets in the way of a desired outcome or when we believe there's a violation of the way things should be. We could also say sadness is an emotion that we have at the same times. Anger and sadness. So if I rephrase her, anger or sadness is an emotion we feel when we are not accepting things as they are. That's the practice, acceptance. Not fighting the reality that exists. We can only begin to heal and release the emotion when we accept that a new paradigm has to be accepted. Only when we accept that the new paradigm or the new reality, only when we do that can we choose to act. But we've got to accept it first. So let's set Brene aside and let's go back in time and pick up Benjamin Franklin, an older teacher. He said, whatever is begun in anger ends in shame. What he's alluding to is the necessity for us to grapple with our emotions, to let that wave pass before we take action or make decisions or react in ways that are going to produce more shame and pain. And both of those quotes, Brene Brown and Ben Franklin, both of those quotes point us to the wisdom that Jane Beach shared this morning through Susan. Sit with your feelings, sit with them, and examine them, those emotions, carefully and slowly. Because when we feel these strong emotions, we should remember it's a wake-up call. This wave is an alarm to remind us that it's probably best to spend some time in communion with your holy self, with your spiritual self. Give ourselves time to think and pray and feel our emotional reaction as we start accepting whatever has happened. Give ourselves time to consider the possible paths that we might take out of this moment and move forward in a new way. Mindfulness, because if we don't give ourselves time to really feel our sadness and anger, we can fall into some really unhealthy responses. So I want to talk about that for a second, because typically when we're swirling in those two emotions, it's easy to fall into shaming ourselves with guilt. What does that sound like? I should have done something. I should have known something. It's my fault. That's pulling the anger and sadness onto us to carry as a weight that we carry. Or the other unhealthy response is the opposite. We push it out onto something else and blame. We blame. And if you've watched the television or you continue to watch the television about this situation, that's both of those things are happening. Some people are pulling it onto them. We should have. And some people are pushing it onto others. You should have. And neither one is accepting the reality. And what do we do next, right? It's someone's fault. It's the government's fault. It's the system's fault. Somebody's fault. The point is to not pull the emotion in to carry it, nor push it onto someone else in your pain. Mindfulness brings us to acceptance of what is, so then we can make the holy choice. Sharon Salzberg says, when you practice mindfulness of anger, you're working toward engaging with anger and all the emotions and thoughts that arise with presence and compassion. So Sharon's encouraging us all to pay attention to our thoughts and be present for them. So in this time of contemplation within yourself, it's helpful to carefully consider all the players in whatever situation you brought to mind. Consider all the players. You're invited to remember that everyone involved is human, with their own hurts, their own wounds, their own history, their own lessons. And so are we. Compassion can only rise up in our souls when we've allowed ourselves to mindfully and carefully feel whatever we feel until it breaks into a window of love, self-love, and the love of others. None of us want to sit in anger or sadness or linger in these emotions for long periods of time, but we can find ourselves there, can't we? Just sitting in them for a long time. And sometimes we stay in those feelings for so long, kind of stuck in them, because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to rise up out of the pattern, and we can get lost, not knowing how to find our way back to the light. And if that's where you are right now, and incidences like we had this week are kind of piling up into an overwhelming grief or depression, I want you to know that there is a way out. I encourage you to listen to your soul that brought you here today to hear this lesson, and let your soul guide you to the help that you need to break this cycle in your mind and your heart and whatever numbing choices you've been making. Because guess what? What I found is if we are stuck in a pattern of guilt and shame and blame and all that stuff, we try to avoid feeling it. We try to avoid the reality of whatever happened. And we humans, we are crafty. We will find a way to numb it, won't we? What do? Whether it's shopping or hoarding or drugging or drinking or binge watching or social media or gambling or whatever, sexing, we are going to find a way not to feel, to not allow one more thing to cause us to feel. But it is only through living, through feeling and connecting that we are healed. That's the only way. That mic's loud. It, it may take medicine. It may take therapy. It may take prayer and guidance, and it's likely going to take all three, actually. But it's time to live again. It's time to find the way back to our divine birthright, joy. Joy. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu wrote a book together called The Book of Joy, and in it they wrote about this very thing. They said, the way through the sadness and grief that comes from great loss is to use it as motivation and generate a deeper sense of purpose. Can we rise from the events of this week to a greater sense of purpose? Our emotions can help us figure that out. If we can turn to that warm place inside our spirit, we can transmute our sadness and anger through love, through love. One of the secrets is to return to the source of your pain, because of the root of everything making you sad or angry is love. Return to love. And since love is another name for God, I could be saying return to God, return to spirit, return to the divine intelligence that resides right inside your very core. Return to your connection with something bigger than yourself. So what does this look like for me in relationship to Uvalde, Texas this week? I must return to my love of children. I must return to my heart of compassion for troubled teenagers. I must return to my calling to vote in every single election. I must return to my commitment to dedicate my energy to parenting my adult child and supporting other parents who are trying to do that too. I must return to the knowing that every soul has a purpose for being alive, and that death is another part of living, and death is not a negative thing. It's a natural thing, and it happens in a million different ways, and there's a spiritual intelligence behind every situation, and I must accept that as truth. I must return to my commitment as a minister to help every single person I meet to feel acceptance and love and compassion, no matter what kind of pain they are in, no matter what their emotions are. So bring to your mind your issue again that causes you anger or sadness. So instead of asking why, which is a pointless, unanswerable question, ask a bigger question. What does my awareness of this situation call forth in me? What must I return to in response to this situation, or this loss, or this pain, or this sadness, or this anger? What am I being asked to return to and remember? Sadness and anger are absolutely a part of being human on this plane, because impermanence is a part of being on this human plane. Thankfully, we have a spiritual life jacket to use when these waves are really big. So I could summarize this whole month. If I could, I would remind you that your soul was given a mind and an emotional heart when it arrived inside this magic suit of a body. Emotions are a tool that we can use to navigate our way out of pain and forward to something more fulfilling and satisfying in our lives. Emotions are meant to be felt and expressed and understood when they show up to color your day. So my invitation to each of you is to embrace your emotional heart. It is a gift. Be curious and allow emotions to teach you things about yourself and your life. So whatever you are feeling today, you can learn from it. So I want to summarize with a paraphrased list from Robert Holden's book that I mentioned early in the month. Consider this. If fear is visiting you today, fear wants you to know that you're being way too independent and not trusting enough in life or God or others. Anger is trying to tell you that you keep giving your power away inappropriately in certain situations, and that something is impermanent and must give way to something better. Stress is an invitation to change something. You're being asked to make better and smarter choices. Resentment wants you to see that you are in sacrifice, playing the role of martyr and leaving yourself out of your life. Guilt. Guilt is a sign that you are out of integrity with yourself and that it's time to be as God created you. Envy is a siren that says, for God's sakes, when are you going to see how beautiful you are? Depression is a call for love. It wants you to know that you need to love yourself and accept more love from others. It's time to move toward the light within you. Sadness wants you to give yourself the gift of your own attention and to make sure you don't lose sight of what is really true and that something meaningful must be released. And the sweetest emotions, happiness, joy, excitement, they're inviting you to lean into the experience you are having in that moment and prioritize yourself in this particular way, because these are the emotions that point the way toward your light. Emotions are wise teachers if we pay attention to them and allow them the space to share their wisdom. In closing, I want to read another poem by the young Black contemporary poet Amanda Gorman. She's the poet from Biden's inauguration. May it be our prayer. It's called New Day's Lyric. May this be the day we come together. Mourning, we come to mend. Withered, we come to weather. Torn, we come to tend. Battered, we come to better. Tethered by this year of yearning, we are learning that though we weren't ready for this, we have been readied by it. We steadily vow that no matter how we are weighed down, we must always pave a way forward. This hope is our door, our portal. Even if we never get back to normal, someday we can venture beyond it, to leave the known and take the steps. So let us not return to what was normal, but reach towards what is next. What was cursed, we will cure. What was plagued, we will prove true. When we tend to argue, we will try to agree. Those fortunes we forswore, now the future we foresee. Where we weren't aware, we're now awake. Those moments we missed, and now these moments we make, the moments we meet, and our hearts, once altogether beaten, now altogether beat. Come, look up with kindness yet, for even solace can be sourced from sorrow. We remember not just for the sake of yesterday, but to take on tomorrow. We heed this old spirit in a new day's lyric. In our hearts we hear it. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, be bold, sing time this year. Be bold, sing time. For when you honor yesterday, tomorrow you will find. Know what we've fought need not be forgot, nor for none. It defines us, binds us as one. Come over, join this day just begun. For wherever we come together, we will forever overcome. And so it is.